there's a viral video that's making its rounds that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about it because there are elements of this video, if you're doing somewhat of a breakdown in regards to the mechanics of what is taking place in this moment, it's difficult to process this as a human being in the very specific moment that it's taking place in. But given the ability of objectively looking at it, there's certain elements of this that are familiar in regard to the way and the reason that people are out there protesting now as we speak. A man in a Costco in Florida is walking around without a mask. Now this in and of itself is problematic, especially coming from Florida, where you have they're ballooning, they're hitting their crescendo in regards to cases up to this point. And she asked him, an elderly woman, to put on a mask. Like, hey, where's your mask? Now, I've engaged people like this who weren't wearing a mask, and these people are lunatics. Ultimately, they're taking something that is an act of policy and an act of trying to health, meaning science, protecting the individual's health and body, and considering that 42% of the cases of COVID-19 took place in 0.1% of the situation, meaning nursing homes. Well, you get to this notion of, or the question at the very least of why. Now, what you realize is that people who are older, people who have certain comorbidities, meaning high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, certain things that you can't necessarily see just by looking at the individual, make them that much more susceptible, not just to the illness, but also to death from that illness. It's not an issue of policy. It's an issue of science. It's an issue of health. This is not a political statement. People are not, at the very least, who are walking around wearing the mask, are not doing so to say fuck Trump. They're doing so because they want to protect their life and their limb and to ensure that they get home without spreading anything to maybe loved ones that may be susceptible to coming down with that particular illness. That's the reason. It's not a political statement. And regardless of me saying that, I know that there's still going to be a group of people that entirely consider walking around with a mask on as being to some, not walking around with a mask is somehow a political stance. People's lives are at stake. I would ask that stores be aware of this, and that people who may get sick from walking around in stores that engage people without a mask and that maybe are squished in numbers that are too large, to basically sue the living shit out of that store. It is the store's responsibility to ensure that people who are walking around in that store are to some degree relatively safe. It is not the responsibility of the individuals. It shouldn't have been left to this older woman to go up and tell this guy to wear a mask, especially when she have no idea whether or not this guy is a lunatic. It would be nice if you could walk up to your fellow person and say, hey, I don't want to die. Could you, take the basics of precautions to ensure that I don't die and that you yourself remain safe? It is not up to the individual to have to do that. Both the individual and the person who's asking him are equals. The fact that he's not walking around with a mask in and of itself makes it clear on where he stands on that issue and what he thinks about that issue. It is up for the store to care about the people who are walking around in that store. And if you're going to have, conceivably, older people walking around in your store, considering the older people are that much more susceptible to this illness, your store, Costco, should take responsibility for this. This lunatic, screaming at the height of his lungs, should have been kicked out of the store or should not have even been allowed into the store. He eventually gets escorted out, but that's besides the point. He is threatening and attacking somebody at that store while screaming at the height of his lungs that he feels threatened. Talk about fragility. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or, for that matter, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and we appreciate you, the opportunity for allowing me to do it. This video is so aggravating on so many levels. This guy is a fucking lunatic. This is taking place in Florida, in a Costco. Now, as you know, some of these states have eased up the restrictions. Here in Maryland, they've done the same, so you have stores that have a lot of people jam-packed in. Now, the fiscal incentive of the stores that are allowing people to come in, despite whatever these precautions are, the store has every incentive in the world to allow as many people that want to go into that store as wanted. Because at the end of the day, they need to make profit, and with the loosening of restrictions, I would imagine you could take the gamble, from a probability's sake, that you're not necessarily going to get dinged for doing so. It wasn't the case at Home Depot here in Maryland when I went in, where people were jam-packed into that particular store trying to buy this or to buy that. My point is, if you're in the store like this, there should be a modicum of precautions, especially if you're living in a state like Florida where COVID-19 is running rampant. If you are in a Costco, it should not be up to the individual in that store to ask somebody to please take the basics of precaution, ensure that I don't die, or for that matter, one of my family members don't die because you wanted to walk around making a political statement without a mask on. That's up for the store. The store should do that just because it should care, to the minimalist degree, that its people remain healthy as they go about their capitalistic enterprise. Let's take a look, and you tell me if this guy is not a lunatic. This video went viral for a reason, and that's the reason why.
You're 6 feet away from you.
You're harassing me.
I'm not harassing you. You are infecting us. You're coming close to me. You're coming close to me.
Back off!
Dan.
Threaten me again!
Dan.
Back the fuck up! Put your fucking phone down!
You're 6 feet away from me.
So it wasn't enough back up. You also have to put your phone down. You put your phone down because I realize I look like a complete and fucking asshole here. And in looking like a complete and fucking asshole, I don't want to be recorded like that. Nevertheless, here we are with this recording of this random guy screaming that he feels threatened as he is in the process of threatening someone else. By the way, holding your phone up, that's his phone. He can do whatever he wants with that phone. You screaming like a maniac that you feel threatened. This puts you in the mind of something, right? What does this put you in the mind of? Cops. When a cop has his knee on a man's throat, where the guy is handcuffed, the guy can't move, and the cop is yelling, "Stop moving! Stop resisting! Stop resisting! You're bleeding on me! You're injuring me, sir! You're injuring me!" Or they would make the point of saying, after murdering somebody, shooting him in the back, I felt threatened. Wait, you're saying when you shot him in the back and he didn't have a gun, that you felt threatened? Yes. Yes, I did. I was terrified. He was so black. He was so black. And they would typically get off on that. Well, I mean, the guy is black. I mean, so, and they would allow that to walk. So to see somebody basically emulate the way cops behave outside of a cop setting looks as ridiculous as it is in the cop setting. Nobody's threatening this guy. This guy was just asked to put on the mask, and this is the way he responded. This kind of gets to my point of why I say it's the store's responsibility to ensure that if somebody is walking into that store, that that person has a mask on. And at the very least is taking the basics of precaution to ensure that the people who are working at that store are safe. Costco did not do that. And not just didn't do that, ended up with a situation where putting that responsibility on a person who doesn't have any sort of leverage or power to affect what should be rational action. Costco did escort this guy out. Besides the point, he shouldn't have been there in the first place if he was going to put on a mask. And if any of the employees saw him walking around without a mask, they should have said, "Sir, you need to have a mask on if you're going to be in the store." Every place in Maryland that I've been in up to this point, that has been the case. That has been true. People have been walking around with their mask on. And the one situation where the person didn't have on the mask, the guy from 7-Eleven basically said, you need to put on a mask. This guy was walking around with it around his throat, acting as if the mask doesn't work. Now, I know who he was trying to invoke here. He's looking at Donald Trump, and he's listening to stuff Donald Trump says. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is a fucking liar. He's been that way from day one. This guy in 7-Eleven basically said that the masks don't work anyway. And it's like, you will know they actually do work. And the objective of this is to make sure that the virus goes away first, which is a mask is a small price to pay for that if you're going to walk around out into the city. But no, it's become a political stance, just like climate change has become a political stance, despite the fact that climate change is not a political question at all. It's a scientific one. It becomes political when companies don't necessarily want to deal with the effects of dealing with it earnestly. It will curtail their profits, at which point they deal with their political leaders, where they dump a ton of money in their pocket, and those political leaders have a certain ideology of the world that allows them to fall in line with that particular point of view. And this, the mask, is becoming something similar. Hydrochloroquine has become something similar. A drug that is prescribed by doctors has now become a banner for people who back Trump. This is so repugnant. You're threatening a person. The only thing I wish is if that person would have knocked you the fuck out. Hopefully, you'll find the right one. Like, share, and subscribe.